The Conquest of Mecca. The conquest of Mecca was a peaceful conquest, when the Prophet of Allah, Muhammad, may peace be upon him, performed a peaceful Umrah, with a large group of Muslims. My good student, Anas, we will remember his marriage to Maymunah, bint al-Harith, Hilaliyah, how Ja'far bin Abu Talib was martyred at the Battle of Mu'tah, and how Abu Sufyan, his uncle, was drawn into Islam. So my good student Anas, let's remember how the Prophet of Islam, may peace be upon him, entered and purified the Kaaba, and declared Mecca an Islamic state. The Prophet performs Umrah, may peace be upon him. It was now the end of a year after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, was now free to perform Umrah. Abu Raham, Ghifari, agreed to take care of the matters in Medina, and the Prophet set out towards Mecca with 60 sacrificial camels, while Najjar ben Jundub Aslami was the caretaker of the camels. Bashir ben Saad carried weapons, and 100 horses, just in case the Quraysh broke their covenant. The Muslims donned the ihram, Adul, Hulayfa, and started saying, "Here I am, at your service, O Allah." My good student, Anas, these words that we say, after donning the ihram, at the Kaaba are called the Talbiyah. A peaceful Umrah. The Muslims took only sheathed swords when they came close to Mecca. The Prophet of Allah, may peace be upon him, rode on his camel, Qaswa, and touched the black stone of the Kaaba with his stick. He circumambulated the Kaaba on his Qaswa. His right shoulder was uncovered, and displayed valor. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had asked the men to run, when circumambulating the Kaaba, to show their strength, and this astounded the Quraysh, as they found the men quite contrary to their assumption that they were a weak lot.
Sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
After the circumambulation, the Prophet performed 7 circuits between the hills of Safa and Marwa. This Hajj ritual, my good student, Anas, is called the Sa'i. The Prophet, peace be upon him, concludes Umrah at Marwa. The Prophet slaughtered the sacrificial animals and shaved his head. He then sent for the remaining men, beckoning them to perform Umrah.
Sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
3 days after his stay in Mecca, the Prophet of Allah, may peace be upon him, married Maymunah, bint al-Harith, Hilaliyah. Rasulullah, may peace be upon him, completed his journey on the 4th day, and headed back to Medina. He stopped at Saf, located at about 9 miles from Mecca, where he married Maymunah, may Allah be pleased with her.
Radiyallahu anha.
Maymunah, bint al-Harith, Hilaliyah, may Allah be pleased with her. Maymunah, bint al-Harith, Hilaliyah, was from the prestigious Hilal tribe of Mecca. Her father's name was Hariz ibn Hazan, and her mother's name was Hind bint Auf. She was the half-sister of Zainab bint Khuzaymah.
Radiyallahu anha.
Maymunah was determined, friendly, and relied on Allah, His Majesty. She once borrowed a large sum of money. Someone inquired about the risk, and she said that Allah, His Majesty, Himself will pay back the loan, if a person has that intention. When Maymunah was divorced and widowed, she desired to marry Muhammad, peace be upon him. She went to al-Fadl, who informed Abbas. The Prophet, peace be upon him, married her 7 years after Hijrah. Aisha said that she was most fearful of Allah, His Majesty, and best in maintaining ties of kinship. She never disputed with other wives.
Radiyallahu anha.
The Battle of Mu'tah, life resumed in Medina, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, took up several expeditions. Among his expeditions was the Battle of Mu'tah. When the Muslims faced a huge Roman army, and lost their best fighters, Zayd ibn Haritha, and Ja'far ibn Abu Talib,
رضي الله عنهم أجمعين.
it was during this battle that Ja'far ibn Abu Talib, second in command, who held the standard, sustained 90 wounds, and both his hands were cut off. Allah, His Majesty, bestowed him honor with the title, Athtayyah, the one with wings. Allah, His Majesty bestowed him wings to fly in paradise.
رضي الله عنه.
With both commanders martyred, Khalid bin al-Walid finally took up the fight against Romans, and came to be known as the Sword of Allah. Khalid bin al-Walid set up several war strategies, and won the battle, several days later. On the way, for the Battle of Mecca, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah allowed the Quraysh and Muslims to join any other tribe. Banu Khuzar were with Muslims and Banu Bakr were with the Quraysh. During Shaban, Banu Bakr attacked Banu Khuzar, killing 20 men, and forcing the rest to leave Mecca. The Quraysh supported Banu Bakr. Banu Khuzar approached the Prophet of Allah, may peace be upon him, for support, who promised to protect them. Realizing the violation of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the Quraysh sent Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harb to the city of Medina for a possible extension. Abu Sufyan visited his daughter, Habibah, who greeted him coldly. Abu Sufyan left and visited Abu Bakr, Umar and Ali, asking them to intervene and have the treaty extended. But they all refused.
رضي الله عنهم أجمعين.
Abu Sufyan apologizes. A war was on the agenda of Rasulullah, may peace be upon him. It was the 10th of Ramadan, 8 years after Hijrah, when the Prophet left Medina with his 10,000 companions. It was then that his cousin, Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harb, who used to frequently insult the Prophet of Allah, peace be upon him, apologized on Ali's advice.
رضي الله عنه.
As he recited a verse from Surah Yusuf, the Prophet forgave him the way Yusuf, may Allah be pleased with him, forgave his brothers. On his way to Mecca, the Prophet offered his Isha prayer at Marah al-Dahran. He then instructed every soldier to light a fire, to trick his enemy into thinking that there was a mighty army.
صلى الله عليه وسلم.
His plan worked, as Abu Sufyan, the commander-in-chief of the Quraysh army, was utterly startled. At that time, Abbas, who was making rounds, spotted him.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. قالوا تالله لقد آثرك الله علينا وإن كنا لخاطئين. قال لا تثريب عليكم اليوم يغفر الله لكم وهو أرحم الراحمين.
I seek refuge from Shaitan, the accursed. They said, by Allah, certainly has Allah preferred you over us, and indeed, we have been sinners. He said, no blame will there be upon you today. May Allah forgive you, and He is the most merciful of the merciful. Surah Yusuf, the 12th chapter of the Holy Quran, verses 91 and 92, recited by Sheikh Menshawi, translation by Sahih International. Abu Sufyan is drawn into Islam. Abu Sufyan, may Allah be pleased with him, flabbergasted by the preparations of the Prophet of Allah, peace be upon him, asked Abbas, what could be the best thing to do? He took Abu Sufyan on his mule to Rasulullah, peace be upon him. The sight of Abu Sufyan infuriated Umar, who rushed to the Prophet. However, Abbas reached the Prophet before Umar. While Umar was ready to kill him, Abbas intervened, and said he had given him shelter. The Prophet agreed, and asked them to come the next morning. When Abu Sufyan met him, the Prophet invited him to Islam. His kindness surprised Abu Sufyan, but he remained doubtful. Abbas coaxed him, and he accepted Islam. Abbas advised the Prophet to honor him. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, made Abu Sufyan's home a place of safety, just as the sacred mosque or their own homes.
رضي الله عنهم أجمعين.
On the way to Mecca, the Prophet of Allah, peace be upon him, set out for Mecca the same morning. Abu Sufyan was to watch the Muslim troops as they marched towards their destination. Abu Sufyan was awestruck by the progress Muhammad, may peace be upon him, had made as a prophet and beloved leader.
صلى الله عليه وسلم.
The Prophet did not intend to hurt anyone this day. His intention was to honor the Kaaba. In Mecca, Abu Sufyan announced what the Prophet of Allah, peace be upon him, had promised him. He said that anyone who entered his house would be safe, and the people would be safe in their homes, or inside the Kaaba. When the Meccans heard this, they all rushed to take shelter. The peaceful conquest of Mecca, the Prophet instructed that Khalid bin al-Walid, the commander-in-chief of the left wing of his army, was to enter the lower part of Mecca, through Qadar, and meet him at Mount Safar. Zubayr commanded the right wing, and was to enter Mecca, through the upper part of Qadar, and come up to Harjoan, and wait for the Prophet's arrival, peace be upon him. The Prophet's army faced only a brief resistance from the Quraysh, and finally entered the sacred mosque.
صلى الله عليه وسلم.
The Kaaba is purified. The Prophet entered the Kaaba, with his followers, while reciting Surah al-Fatiha. He kissed the black stone, and circumambulated the Kaaba. Then he pushed the idols with his stick, while reciting verses, confirming victory of truth over falsehood, from Surah Esra, and Surah Sabah. He took the keys of the Kaaba, from Uthman bin Talha, and opened the doors. He destroyed the idols, in the Kaaba, and removed all pictures.
صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Osama bin Zayd, and Belal, entered the Kaaba, and they prayed 2 rak'ahs, with doors closed. He stood 3 cubits from the front wall. After offering prayer, he went around the mosque glorifying Allah, His Majesty. He stood at the door, facing the Quraysh, and explained Islam to them. He abolished their pagan practices. He set them all free, and gave the keys back to Uthman bin Talha, who was to safeguard them.
رضي الله عنه.
Mecca becomes an Islamic state. The Prophet reached the top of Mount Safar, and prayed. People came to pledge allegiance. Abu Quhafa, the father of Abu Bakr, and Hind bin Uthbah, the wife of Abu Sufyan. About 6 criminals including Ibn Khattal, a maid of Ibn Khattal, Harith bin Nofil, and Mokiz bin Subabah, were slain. A few criminals fled, and later embraced Islam, and were pardoned. When it was morning, the Prophet entered the house of Umhane bint Abi Talib, bathed and prayed 8 rak'ahs of 2 units each. It was time for Zuhr. Belal was asked to call the azan, from Kaaba's roof. This became the proclamation of Islam.
رضي الله عنه.
The Ansars wondered if the Prophet would return. He reassured them that he would live and die with them. He stayed in Mecca for 19 days, and abolished all pagan practices. Mecca was now an Islamic state. Cleansing the Kaaba, Rasulullah, peace be upon him, set up pillars, to mark the boundaries of Kaaba. It was announced that all idols be destroyed. Khalid bin al-Walid traveled to Nakhla, to destroy the temple of Oz-Zar. Amr bin Oz demolished the idol of Suwa, worshipped by Banu Hudayl. Saad bin Zayd Ashali destroyed the idol of Mana, worshipped by the tribes of Ghassan, Kalb, Oz, Khazraj, and Khuzar. The Prophet continued to preach Islam, in Shore Wall, until a rival tribe, the Hawazin, joined hands with the tribe of Thaqif from Taif, to prevent him from spreading Islam further. More tribes came forward to support them. When the Prophet of Allah, peace be upon him, came to know of their plan, he was forced to send an army towards Taif.
صلى الله عليه وسلم.